Here are some examples of CashTechs and what they do.
Cash, the world's first bank-grade platform which turns hundreds of thousands of merchants into virtual bank branches. Let's take the simple example of cash withdrawal. With Cash, all the user has to do is pull up the app, key in the amount she needs, and find a nearby store. Cash then taps into the merchant's existing cash deposits and turns the store into a virtual ATM. All the user has to do is scan the QR code and withdraw their cash. And that's not all. Users can also perform other banking transactions, such as opening an account or applying for a loan, all without running to the bank. Through Cash, shops and users become an ever-expanding, self-replicating network that banks can tap into with zero upfront cost. We're estimating over 500,000 touchpoints in Asia alone, much more than both bank branches and ATMs combined. It's everywhere banking on a truly unprecedented scale. Because with Cash, banking is always right around the corner.
We are Sonnect. Use your smartphone to withdraw money right where you need it, at coffee shops, restaurants, or bakeries. With Sonnect, you will have an ATM at every corner. Choose a Sonnect shop and select the desired amount you would like to withdraw. Visit the shop like a normal customer. Show the barcode to the cashier. After scanning the barcode, you'll receive your money. And at the same moment, why don't you treat yourself when you're already here? Money withdrawal was never easier and more intuitive. Sonnect, the ATM on your smartphone.
If your business doesn't stay current, it can lead to frustration on all sides. And your customers have an ever-changing array of ways to pay: cash, card, via a digital wallet, or a bank transfer. We accept over 70 different payment methods, online, in-store, or on the go. And with our wide menu of tools, applications, and banking relationships, you can provide your customers a secure, instant, and personalized payment experience. Plugging into PaySafe means connecting your customers to the ways they want to pay.
Spare is a mobile ATM network that turns any cash register into an ATM. ATMs are bulky, risky, and expensive. Do yourself a favor. Get rid of that ATM. Spare gives you the ability to dispense cash directly from your register, making it super convenient for your customers. So it will increase foot traffic for your business, reduce the liability of the extra cash you have on hand, and lower merchant costs while increasing your revenue. Here's the best part. Instead of paying merchant fees to banks, Spare pays you. What are you waiting for? Visit www.gotspare.com and join our family of Spare merchants today. Welcome to Spare, your private ATM. Spare is very simple to use. Click on Get Cash and log in using your Facebook account. And then enter your secure 4-digit PIN. Once you're logged in, put money in your Spare escrow account from the wallet section under Settings. Select the currency and the amount you need. Then pick your favorite merchant and send your request. We will send you a one-time use QR code that you can access in the top right corner of the map screen after the merchant accepts your request. We will also text you a one-time use PIN that expires within 15 minutes. Then, simply navigate to the merchant that you have selected. Approach the friendly clerk and present your secure QR code. And get your cash. It's just that easy.
Welcome to our second web chat in the New Perspective series. Today we will talk about CashTechs, a relatively new actor in the cash community, but nevertheless a real change driver in terms of how cash is accessed, used, and moved. Through this series of web chats, we will address a range of adjacent issues that are having a direct impact on cash usage worldwide. Our goal is to ensure that the international banknote designer and design decision-making communities are aware of these critical issues influencing demand for cash as a payments tool in the crowded payments market space. As more and more actors enter this market, we must at some point ask, can banknote design support or enable innovation in the cash cycle and make a contribution to improving how cash is actually accessed? As a design professional, you may ask, why should I be interested in all this stuff? I'm simply far too removed from the dynamics of the cash cycle to make a difference. Well, we aim to change this mindset through the New Perspective web chat series and equip you with sufficient knowledge to start thinking differently, to start thinking about how design can act as an enabler of innovation in the cash cycle. Now, CashTechs are clearly emerging as a disruptive force in terms of the classical cash cycle involving traditional actors involved in distribution and access. But who exactly are they? What is their goal? How are they changing the landscape? And do they have the capacity to effect significant positive change? These and more questions will be addressed by our panel of experts today. And indeed, we are very privileged to welcome a fantastic group who will now share their knowledge, insights, and experience with us on the subject of CashTechs. First of all, we welcome today Mr. Guillaume Lepecq from CahsEssentials, a recognized cash industry expert with a truly holistic or global view on cash and payment dynamics. And Guillaume, correct me if I'm wrong, you're also behind the recent report that was published by CahsEssentials on CashTechs, taking us into the future.
Yes.
We welcome also John Winchcombe. Welcome back, John, a currency and payments consultant with a lifetime of experience behind him in the cash and non-cash payment industry. And finally, we welcome Mr. Julian Schubert, Director of Data Solutions at Koenig and Bauer. Julian has a particular interest in CashTechs and how their activity is having an impact on cash cycle models today. So, gentlemen, let's get started by going straight to the point with our first question today, and that is, who exactly are CashTechs?
Well, CashTech is a term that was recently coined by CahsEssentials. And for us, it represents the encounter of cash and technology. And the idea is to bring together innovators, startups, scale-ups, as well as incumbent organizations who are leveraging innovation, technology, and creativity to improve access to cash, facilitate its acceptance, and more broadly, improving the efficiency of the cash cycle. CashTech also means a three-way win for consumers, for retailers, and for banks. Consumers have access to a high-density cash distribution network. Retailers get to offer new services, notably cash withdrawal or cash deposit, with the benefits of more cross-selling and foot traffic. And for banks, CashTech allows them to expand their network at a lower cost.
If people ask me what is the definition of a CashTech, I often try to really narrow it down to the very basics to make them understand and say CashTechs are companies that try to remove friction in the cash cycle, focused or mainly focused on the consumer side and enabling it by, let's say, new technologies. So I of course, that is not everything about CashTech, as Guillaume already explained in all the details, but I think that really narrows it down to the key points.
Yeah. At the moment, it is focused very much on the consumer side. I think CashTechs, I define it as the melding of cash into the non-cash world and its infrastructure. It's taking the technology of the modern technology and making cash work with it and be better and do more. And as Julian said, it's been dealing with the frictions of cash. I think that there's potential to do a lot more, not just with the consumers, but in other areas as well. But CashTech is a very positive force.
Okay, and for the benefit of our viewers, there seems to be an ever expanding vocabulary or lexicon associated with evolution in the cash community today. We saw the emergence of fintechs from 2008 onwards. Now we have this term coined as CashTechs. What would you say the principal differences are between a fintech and a CashTech?
So maybe I can answer first and give my view here. So basically, there is no major difference in my opinion. So the fintechs came up and, let's say, tried to enable, or again, removing friction from financial transactions in general, enabled by technology. That means, again, removing the friction either from the user or from a bank or from any other party in this kind of financial transaction. And now the consequence of applying this knowledge or this systematic to the cash world, this is then what defines a cash tech. So let's say the basic principle that follows the fintech, you can now apply to a cash tech, and just in the world of cash and not all the other financial transactions available.
Historically, fintech has been around for much longer. It also covers a much broader scope. It covers the whole range of financial services. Fintech has already largely succeeded in disrupting traditional financial services. It's been attracting tens of billions of dollars in venture capital. But approximately a third of the fintechs operate specifically in the payment transaction markets, and very often on the false promise of displacing cash. Interestingly, in some cases, fintechs have actually retroactively added cash features. Some examples. In the US, Square, which is a person-to-person payment app, added a cash withdrawal feature to its prepaid card. PayPal now enables users to withdraw cash from their wallet using a prepaid card. In 2017, Amazon launched the Amazon Cash service, which enables people to add and withdraw cash from their digital wallets. I think CashTech, on the other hand, shows that digital can be harnessed to preserve cash instead of working to overturn it. And it aims at making cash usage simpler, as Julian was saying, remove frictions, but also reduce costs for retailers.
I think the majority of fintech is nothing to do with cash. It is exploiting the opportunities that technology allow to move away from the legacy systems that banks are lumbered with, and to be far more agile and to rethink processes and to create convenience and choice in digital payments in a way that hasn't existed before. And much of fintech, like the iceberg, is beneath the surface, and we, the consumer, just see some of the benefits. And you could take, for example, I'm going to talk about checks later on, the fact that if someone gives me a check, I can now photograph it. I don't have to take the check to the bank, and I'm credited with the money. That's an example of where a fintech just overlaps slightly with the old world. Most of the fintech world has nothing to do, or very little to do, with the space that we work in, but there are some exceptions to that.
Very good. CashTechs tend to fit a similar profile in terms of most of them being startup type organizations, very agile, very fast, and clearly motivated by growth, revenue, and profit generation. But what is it that they actually want to achieve, and how are they planning to do it? Not in terms of generating their own business development, but in terms of positively contributing to making cash more accessible, removing, as Julian referred to, friction, or as Guillaume referred to, costs, etc. How would you summarize the mission of CashTechs today?
I mean, I think CashTechs at the moment are, those I'm aware of, are operating into three spaces. There are a group of companies who are really allowing cash to be used for online purchases. You have those which are making cash accessible, the Sonics of this world, and via fintechs and SoCashes. And then, of course, you've got people like Schrapp working on the coin. So it is largely CashTech has been operating in that space. I think there is the opportunity to define CashTech more broadly. So if you take what One Banks has been doing, that's been using open banking to allow shared banks. I think the post office in the UK, its banking hubs are using more legacy technology. But One Banks is certainly, you could define that as a cash tech company. So we have the opportunity to think about cash tech slightly more broadly.
One, we need to be very clear that these are businesses. They don't have a mission to promote or solve all the issues of cash. Their mission is to make their business work. Firstly, I think what I find interesting in this is that it's a very clear indicator of the dynamism of the cash community. It also shows, and this is perhaps counterintuitive to some, that digital can and should be used to preserve and enhance, not displace cash. In terms of activities, as John said, there's the issue of access, there's the issue of acceptance, there's probably an issue of efficiency. But there are many things to invent and reinvent. What I think is fundamental here is to get this process or get this movement more known by our community and the outside world, and create this spirit of innovation.
Yeah, as Guillaume said, I think their main objective is earning money. Yeah, there is no doubt. But I think what's quite important, even for our industry, to recognize is that, let's say, during the last years, many CashTechs, let's say, were founded or tried to enter several markets. And I think that's a very strong message to the market, because the world of cash is worth inventing, is worth establishing a business, and is worth earning money in the end. And this is a very strong message, because if this is becoming public, at least my hope is that more and more of these players will, let's say, enter the world or the business of cash and contribute to the future of cash, making it more frictionless, making it more easy being accessed, and so on and so on. So I think that's it's a quite nice trend in our industry.
So highly complementary, but still a key thing to remember that these are private organizations who are driven by business opportunity, and cash is the area they've moved into to realize that opportunity. As industry experts, CashTech and the actual innovators who are acting as CashTechs are very familiar to you guys. But clearly to our audience, they may not be so familiar with who these organizations are, what type of market spaces they're operating in, and what are their unique service or product offerings. Would anybody like to dare giving an example or just a brief explanation of a given CashTech and what they're doing?
I think, first of all, you have companies such as SoCash in Singapore or Sonict in Switzerland, which are basically building a network of cash access points, which are sometimes called virtual ATMs, but basically enabling consumers to withdraw cash from retailers, often using mobile apps to geolocate and so forth. That's one group. There's a second group with companies such as Vian Fintech, headquartered in Germany, but now operating across multiple European markets, Cashway in France, which both provide quite a broad range of cash services, including virtual banking agency, bill payment, cash deposits, and in the case of Via Fintech, very importantly, the ability to pay cash online. There's a company which I think is quite unique called Pipit Global, which provides a digital platform connected with payment institutions in developing countries, enabling them to accept cash payments from typically the diaspora migrant populations. And then you get rather specialized companies operating on small niches, which one is a Schubert, active in the UK and in Australia, which provides a digital alternative to coins, enabling people to pay cash but receive the change in a digital form. And there's another one called Cash, which is UK based, which basically is developing a solution to enable people to pay online with cash. There are numerous others, and I would also like to mention what is, I think, the mother of all CashTechs, which is M-Pesa. M-Pesa, which is very well known, which is considered as one of the success stories of the last decades in digital payments, and enables people to send money from A to B using not a smartphone, a basic phone. And this is widely popular in Kenya and in other African markets. But Kenya is strictly cash-based. To enter into M-Pesa, you need to deposit cash. The merchants that accept M-Pesa have a deposit in cash with a payment institution. But M-Pesa, for me, is typically the perfect example of how technology can be leveraged to remove frictions in the cash space.
Guillaume, if I could just cite an extract of the CashTech Taking Cash Forward report, where there is a statement that in a 2020 CahsEssentials webinar, almost 2/3 of participants indicated that they expected cash tech startups to drive innovation within the cash cycle. So in other words, basically 2/3 of the delegation said, we believe it's cash techs who are going to drive innovation. So on that point, do you believe that cash techs really have the potential to radically transform how cash is accessed and used?
I certainly think it's an important issue. One key challenge we are facing in many markets is the issue of future access to cash and the parallel issue of acceptance. Access has been limited as banks are closing down branches and ATMs. And we've seen during the pandemic an increasing number of shops and retailers start or refuse to accept cash. Typically, cash techs are addressing this. Do they have the potential to disrupt? Possibly, and I think that's one scenario. But there's also another scenario, is simply that they could partner with incumbent players to continue to provide both access and acceptance. And I think this partnership scenario is the most likely.
I would basically agree with Guillaume, and as he already said, I do not only think they have the potential to transform the world of cash. I think there is already that kind of proof of concept, as you mentioned, Guillaume, with the M-Pesa. So basically what M-Pesa did was allowing, let's say, more people having access to cash. And I'm quite convinced, and I would say, yes, they can transform the world of cash, and yes, they can remove some friction, but of course, they will not do everything better than it was before.
Potential to move in a different direction and look at efficiency as well. But I think in that space, there will need to be considerable help from central banks in the first instance, and maybe from some of the established suppliers. And here, and I think Julian will probably agree with me when I say this, that there's a big part around big data. Because if we had better understanding of where cash is and what its fitness level is and The opportunity, as we heard from the Philippines, with their Cash Services Alliance, the ability to exchange cash efficiently and quickly and at low cost between commercial banks or even retailers is an area that's not been properly exploited yet. And so I think that's just one example. There are examples outside of the consumer side of life where perhaps CashTech has a role to play in a big future.
Now let's look at CashTech in context in terms of the market spaces they're moving into. Now, one of the definitions given for CashTech is really simple: connecting those who have cash with those who need or want cash. And by extension, doing this or achieving this by bypassing some of the traditional infrastructure or actors. Clearly, regardless of what country one looks at, there are established big cash players in any classical cash cycle model, be it cash management companies, commercial banks, retailers, etc., etc. And while some of these will be very open and welcoming to a disruptive force like a CashTech, some potentially have a lot to use. So if I could flip this question over to you, what do you believe are the biggest challenges to CashTechs in their endeavors to make cash more efficient?
I would say there are, let's say, not many challenges, but at least some. So maybe the most important one is legislation. Yeah. If CashTechs want to operate internationally, and I think at least some of them really plan to do so, they just have to keep in mind that, let's say, first of all, the cash cycles differ in many countries across the world, and of course the legislation is different, and this have a new or could have a huge impact on their, let's say, operational business. And I think the second thing, but that's a solvable issue, is typically these CashTechs know a lot about technologies, consumer behaviors, and so on, but sometimes they are missing, let's say, the real knowledge about cash and how a typical cash cycle is driven or operated in some countries. But I think here, as I said, this is a solvable problem. There are players out there, and a simple solution could be just to connect each other.
If they found a good niche, if they have found an opportunity, then they will eventually fly. But their challenges are perhaps the incumbents. So, for example, if you take a Schrapp wanting to do coins, there are a lot of people who just don't want it to happen. They can't get traction. Who will listen to them? And they need to have scale to get momentum. So it's a challenge, and that will be true whether for any startup. I think that there's a lack of interest. Not everywhere in the world is going cashless. And so to get people to take you seriously and to engage with your brilliant idea, again, it's true for any startup in any sector, but getting that enthusiasm can be a challenge. And of course, you have to have a business model and funding to see you through that gap. And maybe that's a place where our industry can see. And we've seen one or two of our companies in our industry step in and invest in these new businesses. So that perhaps that's a role for us. But it's getting momentum, I think, is the natural big challenge for a startup.
I think that the three main challenges, as I understand them, are one, whole regulation and compliance. This is a highly regulated business with all sorts of different regulations in different countries. It is a challenge for these startups to comply, to understand, and to deal with this. And coming back to M-Pesa, I think the way the Central Bank of Kenya and the regulators in Kenya managed a soft approach to regulating this company as it grew is probably a great lesson to what other regulators should do facing CashTechs in other markets. The second issue is raising capital. Tens of billions of dollars have been invested in fintech. As soon as you start explaining to investors that your job is to make cash more efficient, it makes it far more challenging to raise capital than if you're doing something with, say, Bitcoin or whatever other crypto. And the whole image of cash as a, let's say, a traditional industry, and I'm being kind, I think, is makes it more difficult to raise money for them. And then the third issue is to this is a volume industry, and the challenge for them is to achieve a critical mass of business for them to be quickly profitable. And as John was saying, they face all sorts of challenge, including from the incumbents. And this is where perhaps the industry can do more to support that.
Yeah. On that point of industry support, are we doing enough? Could we do more? Again, coming back to the CahsEssentials report on CashTechs. Interestingly, you wrapped up that report with a statement along the lines of, whilst the cash tech market is highly competitive, the spirit and outlook amongst these startups is remarkably collegial, with a high degree of cooperation and interplay and exchange. Do you think cash techs are being afforded that same level of exchange and collaboration by the wider cash industry?
Well, I'll start off by saying that earlier this month, CahsEssentials launched a cash tech forum to further promote innovation, technology, and to support these companies. We currently have 7 companies registered. It's not massively important, but it's a good start, I think. It's basically a place for these companies to exchange amongst themselves, to share with the outside world, and hopefully to get more visibility and promotion. It's an open forum, and everyone is more than welcome.
And Guillaume, on that point, for viewers, if one would like to find out more about this, they visit CahsEssentials.
CahsEssentials website, there's a section dedicated to the cash tech and the cash tech forum. Yes.
I wonder whether we could frame some questions, some problem areas, and invite people to think about them. Even if they don't address those questions, it might stimulate some thought and stimulate some interest. Just be silly for a moment. Things like, when I make a cash payment, how do I earn points? Because we know the consumer loves their points. Or how do we collect data through QR codes for cash payments? And we're not talking about breaking the privacy, but we're talking about generating data from cash payments, which we don't have at the moment. And I'm just throwing pebbles into the pond here. But actually, if the industry could describe some challenges and opportunities, perhaps some of the back-end problems that we face, like the smart exchanges and so on, yeah, that might help. Just a thought.
Okay, very good.
So I think the question, it's a little bit difficult to answer. Yeah? As John already explained, this would be a very good approach, and I even think that the forum Guillaume mentioned is a very good approach as well. But in the end, I think the businesses, let's say the established businesses in the world of cash, have to decide whether there is a fit with one of these cash techs, yeah, or not. And just to support them because of the reason of support, it's a bit difficult to argument, yeah, on both sides. If there is a real need, they will make their own business. If there is no real need, let's say it's not worth supporting them, yeah. In very simple words.
Cash techs, as you mentioned, are active in very different market spaces, ranging all the way from the likes of M-Pesa through to remittances, through to cash access and enabling banking services, online payments, etc. Out of all of the different market spaces that cash techs are moving into, which would you say has the most potential to deliver a benefit for cash and for cash users?
I think the convenience space is where all the opportunity lies. And if CashTechs can make cash convenient for retailers, not just for consumers, but for retailers and banks, they can solve that problem. They will extend the opportunities and the enjoyment and the use of cash very significantly.
I think we could and probably should learn from two things. One is how digital payments have evolved. And secondly is the pandemic. If you look at digital payments, they've been very good at developing specialized solutions for niche markets. PayPal has started off by becoming a solution for person-to-person online payments. Think about Octopus in Hong Kong. It became the payment solution for a fragmented public transport market. And we've seen multiple other examples. They've identified a market, they've created a specific solution. And I think we should be addressing, or the cash world should be addressing cash solutions for those specific niche markets. There are a number of companies that are now doing it for online payments. John mentioned the issue of points, but there are probably numerous other of these micro markets where we need to develop specific solutions, and the digital world has been very good at that. Secondly, we need to learn from the pandemic, because the pandemic has spurred a whole range of innovations in the cash cycle due to social distancing, confinement, shop closures, and so forth. To name a few, we've seen mobile ATMs in a number of locations in India and elsewhere. A number of countries have invented third-party cash collections to enable elderly people or people confined because they were ill or COVID positive or whatever it's called. People would go and collect cash for them. In other markets, we've seen door-to-door cash deliveries. In other markets, we've seen the actual physical distribution of cash to those in need. So in this unique time of the pandemic, there have been a number of innovations that are probably relevant and could be extended. So I think, yeah, there are lessons to be learned. If I had brilliant ideas, I'm not sure I'd share them in this forum. But that would be my suggestion on how to approach the market.
And that is, do you believe that banknote design can actually support or enable CashTechs in their endeavors? Is there something the banknote design community can do to actually help CashTechs?
Maybe I can start. So I think John already mentioned one thing. He mentioned a simple thing regarding QR codes to collect payment data. Yeah, and this is, of course, or must be implemented in the design of a banknote, because there is no QR code today on a typical banknote, yeah, or at least not on many banknotes out there. So I think the answer is yes. I think the answer is not easy, but we should not forget that all the activities CashTechs have started right now are just based on banknotes already in circulation. So basically they used what was available. Yeah, and maybe if they join forces with some very creative people of designers or established players in the cash cycle, there might be other opportunities in the future, but I have nothing very concrete in mind, to be honest.
I confess I struggle to find a really tangible, compelling answer to that question. I'm always keen for designers and R&D and business people to come together to really thrash through, because we can't see the problems that a cash tech can see, and vice versa. So I think it's about talking to each other.
I think we're still in the very early stages of this evolution, but I think cash tech accelerates an existing trend of moving the cash cycle away from the commercial banks and closer to the consumers and the retailers, meaning that it has I believe it will have implications on or need for stronger security, different forms of authentication, but also on the quality of banknotes. So again, this is not new. I think it could accelerate this phenomenon. And I would add that after all, banknote designers are the creative people. So we should get them to brainstorm on what the new solutions are. I think we need to apply the kind of creativity we have on our banknotes to inventing new solutions in the cash cycle.
Excellent point, Guillaume. And I think I'd like to just come back also to what Julian mentioned earlier on, that for the moment, CashTechs are developing new systems around an existing product. But the day where we can actually change the product clearly will give far more latitude and space for the CashTechs to expand their innovation and define and develop new ways of moving that product around. So I think the key will come down to more collaboration and more connectivity between these actors to create better understanding of what's expected, and then to realize that upstream at the design phase. But first and foremost is just awareness and more connectivity between the actors in the community. Would any of you like to give some guidance to viewers of what resources are available for them to learn and discover more about CashTechs and what's happening?
Yeah, I'll start. There's an excellent industry newsletter called Currency News and Cash and Payment News, which I strongly recommend. Great,
thank you, Guillaume. John or Julian, any ideas for those who want to find out more?
I've been going to say go to the CahsEssentials website.
And it could be even easier and just more simple, as these are typically startups. Yeah, just try to screen some startup incubators and let's say even Google new solutions regarding cash. It's very helpful sometimes.
Okay, one final question, which is unilaterally directed towards you, Julian, because John and Guillaume at the previous web chat have been already asked this question. But perhaps you'd like to share your opinion on who'll be using cash in 2030 and why do you think they'll be using it?
So basically, I often say people who want to use it. Yeah, that's my very first answer, because regarding all the discussions, which people have to use cash or want to use cash, I think it's quite important to state, even if a lot of people will have the possibility to go cashless, they just don't want to go cashless. So it's quite important to say, first of all, people who want to pay cash will pay cash in 2030 as well. Yeah, like myself, to be honest. And then I think it's much depending on all the evolving, let's say, tax out there, and even on legislation, if we think about CBDC and so on and so on. So what will happen to the unbanked people? We just can't answer these questions today, definitely. But I'm quite convinced that cash will be around 2030, and almost the same amount of people will still use it by that time.
So gentlemen, thank you very much for making yourselves available and for sharing your knowledge and insights on this fascinating subject of CashTechs. Before we wrap up, would you like to leave a final message or make a final comment for the viewers on the subject of CashTechs?
So if you're a designer and you have some time on your hand, just imagine a world where you have a virtual reality, or even better, augmented reality allows you to use that day to day. Because in a world of augmented reality, it wouldn't just be digits passing from person to person. You could design a digital banknote which you physically hand to somebody else. And that's a project to do when you want to get your creativity going.
Maybe if you're a designer and you have only designed, let's say, physical banknotes for today, so I could really think, why not thinking about, let's say, designing a physical banknote that's then being used in a digital world, like all these upcoming trends like metaverse. Yeah? Maybe this is a great opportunity to even have some cash in a digital world, in a fully digital world, by the way.
So there you go, banknote designers, some input and some suggestions for future creativity and ideation. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making yourselves available, for sharing. This has been very interesting and I think very much to the point. I'm sure the audience are going to appreciate your knowledge and sharing your perspectives on this subject. So